Um, so, mate, I guess the place to start is like the present, I suppose.
Yeah, okay.
So, can you sort of tell me exactly where you're at, and talk a little bit about the the process you're going through at the moment, and how you ended up in
The predicament
the
I'm
predicament
in.
you're in. Yeah, it's funny, the stuff that life throws up.
And you wonder why things are happening. You've got to let that all go. I've got a few. I think I was under a lot of stress, and about the time the tumours would have formed. Yeah, so that's kind of the only thing I can think of. Huge stress for me, with floods and dramas happening next door. There was an attempted murder next door in the house next door, and a few things like and Ange, of course. Yeah, going through all that, but yeah. It's a hard one. It's about, I think, I just try and enjoy the simple things, like focusing on, for me, it's about living day to day, and yeah. Yeah, not sort of grasping out there for something bigger, some bigger experience or go travelling. I had this bucket list, and I suddenly realised that was kind of really irrelevant, like going overseas, buying a camper van, all that sort of stuff, and decent camper van. But then I gradually realised that they weren't the things that gave me most joy, really. It was the simple things, like just popping downtown and running into a few friends, or just hanging out. Yeah, that was the important thing. And now it's getting to the stage where, well, that's all I can do anyway, really. Yeah.
So just sort of backpedaling a tad, like how, when did you find out, and how were you told, and how did it sort of, I suppose, materialise? Like, did you?
How I become aware of it, you mean?
Yeah. Do you want to sort of explain what this condition is, and sort of talk about how it revealed itself, I suppose?
Yeah, okay. Oh, look, I had a bit of, not last year, the end of the year before, so it would have been 2018, right at the very end of the year. I was getting like back rib pain, upper ribs, and then I thought, because I'd been abseiling 2 months or something before, and I thought, which I hadn't done in 20, 30, 40 years or something, and I thought, I really enjoy it when I've done abseiling. I really enjoyed it, and I knew I banged myself pretty hard up against the cliff, but I thought, maybe it's that, I've just cracked a rib. But then I was talking to a friend in the United States, and he had similar pains, went to have it checked out, and it turned out he had melanoma, exactly the same as I've got, riddled throughout his body, and was only given 3 months to live. So I thought, geez, I better go to the doctor and get it checked out. So, did x-rays, that didn't show very much. I showed, what do you call it, asbestos plaque, because I work with asbestos, but they said, that's not a big issue. And then they sent me for CAT scan, and then ultimately a PET scan. But the CAT scan showed it up, and then when I went for a PET scan, which is, they just introduce a radioactive glucose solution and put you in a machine, and I just kind of lit up like a Christmas tree, all little tiny tumours all through my upper body. So not in my brain, not in my liver, which was really good. So then it was a kind of progression from then. They needed to work out what it was, because I just could have been anything, just a form of cancer probably. So to get a biopsy was tricky. They had about 3 attempts through my lungs, couldn't get a sample in, went down through my esophagus, couldn't get a sample in. So then they put a big needle in my back and got a sample from my, around my kidneys. So then they got a confirmation that it was melanoma. And I've got a history of melanoma. I had it 15 years ago, and then it came back about 5, 6 years ago in my right ear, which I had to have all the inside of my ear cut out, and then I had a month of radiation then. So it would have been a transference from the, must have been a few cells left over from the ear, and they've been floating around in the body. And then I was under all that stress, like I talked about earlier, and probably my immune system got a bit run down and it started to take off, really. Yeah. So that was the story.
What was your immediate reaction? Did you go into shock, or was it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you just sort of, I can't remember back then. I think I was pretty knocked back, but at the beginning you're sort of in hope, you know, you're only at the very beginning, and they were saying, oh, well, there's lots of treatments for melanoma. Yeah, so I think I had a, lung function test. I talked to a breathing specialist, and he said, oh, look, he said worst case scenario, you'll probably have about 2 years. That's if, we can't do anything then. So, but there were lots of things to do, lots of really effective, because melanoma is a very heavily mutated type of cancer, so it's much more vulnerable to treatments, and there are more treatments available apparently. But so I did the first line of treatment, which is about 70% effective in most melanoma patients, which is an immunotherapy. So I did that for about 6 months, and then it just wasn't doing it. I had one tumour in my upper chest, which has kind of grown from that, the size of a marble, to probably, the size of an orange and a half now, and which is causing big difficulties now, and will probably ultimately kill me. Who knows? So then that's not working. They'll send me off for another experimental trial, which was happening on the Gold Coast. And fairly quickly it was shown, like with the treatment, it was shown it wasn't because a very large tumour just kept growing. It's, wrapped itself around one of my bronchial tubes and it's starting to restrict that, and will probably eventually collapse a lung. A big major arts, blood supply. I forget what's the big one that comes out of your heart and feeds you. Could be the aorta. Yeah. Anyway, it's wrapped around there. That one of the big blood supply vessels. The big, I think it's the size of a wrist in a older person like me, or maybe even bigger. They're quite large. Younger person is probably, I don't know, 2 inches in diameter or something. A bit surprising, really. But yeah, that was non-effective, the second line of treatment. So I haven't got many options left, really. In fact, so it's very unlikely that I'll come through this. I will try other things. I'm due to start what they call palliative radiation to try and reduce the tumour for a short term, so that at least I can swallow food. Hopefully, yeah. And there may be other kind of immunotherapy treatments that small possibility of them chancing with bigger side effects, really. Yeah. So it's kind of like been a journey about, initially there was, oh yeah, I've got this problem, but there's hope at the end of the road. And then bit by bit, the little light at the end of the tunnel has got smaller and smaller, and it's almost non-existent now. And it's about accepting, really, it's been a gradual process of, well, this looks like it's becoming inevitable, that, yeah, I'm going to die, which is, it's kind of, Yeah, so it hasn't been sudden. It's been a really slow process of kind of so it's been a good chance to get my head around it, I guess. It's not like a big shock that, you know, I've sort of found out I've got a tumour and I've got, yeah, you've only got a month to live or something. It's been kind of building up to it, really. Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I think for some people, like, yeah, it can be quite awkward and confronting, even talking about this stuff, you know. And I wasn't sure how you'd feel about having a camera pointed at you, but I think one of the reasons I thought it was important is because, you know, like we're all on this journey, aren't we? You know, we're all and we don't know when our time is going to come, and you know, sometimes you sort of think, you know, people who have that time to sort of contemplate and let go and have the small deaths and, you know, leading up to that final departure from the body, you know, you sort of think, you know, that can be a gift, but at other times, you know, you can process a lot of fear, and, you know, I guess, but what I did think was that, you know, out of all the people I know, like in my landscape, you know, you were probably the most articulate and, you know, sort of.
Wish I was. But, anyway.
But in terms of the, you know, you've always had such a beautiful way of looking at life and the world, and I thought, you know, I can imagine, you know, I mean, I can't imagine what you're going through, but I sort of, you know, I always sort of felt that, you know, you're one of these old souls that, you know, has probably been through this process quite a few times before, if there's such a thing as past lives, and, you know, I get the sense there's a lot of, I don't know, I think it seems to me that you know, you've been blessed with the resources to deal with this. A lot of people just sort of go into panic, but you know, you've always sort of had, you've sort of seemed to spend a lot of your life thinking about presence and, you know, what we really are. And can you talk about that journey a little bit and what?
Yeah, look, for me, I think I'm a really slow learner, and I'm not really quick on the uptake. So I feel really fortunate that I've kind of been nurtured along over. It's a relatively short period of time, but things have been stretched out because there's been so much going on. But it's only 15 months or something now. I didn't find out, I think, until February that it was really, really serious. So it's been a slow, but what I kind of realised fairly early in the piece is where you are becomes kind of normal very quickly, and that normalcy, however you say it, is changes. So now even this kind of, like, I can only eat maybe 1 to 2 meals a day. If I'm really, really lucky, if I'm really fortunate, I can eat 1 or 2, and they've got to be a gruel. So, and that's suddenly become my normalcy, really. So, you know, at the beginning of the year, my life wasn't really, there was no change, really. As soon as I started the treatment, my energy levels were cut down by, you know, 80%. I had very low energy. I could hardly do anything. And before Christmas, the tumour was pushing on my lungs, so it was causing atrial fibrillation, which can really make you feel really, really tired. I wasn't aware of it. So I spent weeks in bed, you know, could hardly get out of bed. But that's sort of become normal too, you know. I kind of just listened to a lot of audio books. You know, I did get slightly depressed, I think, at that stage, or, you know, and I was, at that point, just before Christmas, I thought, yeah, look, I could check out of here, you know, any time, because life had become wasn't a lot in it for me. But even, it's the simple things, like I went down to a local swimming hole, Marram Falls, recently with my brother and a friend, Linda, and it's just like really simple things. I was puffing and panting by the time I got back up the hill, after going for a swim. But it doesn't take, there's so, simple things are so joyful in life, and even if it's only for a couple of hours or an hour or even half an hour, it's like even just walking over into the park. Because sometimes I go days and I don't even get out of the house, I haven't got the energy. But you can still really... I often think of Viktor Frankl, when he talked about... I can't even remember the name of his book, but he talked about when they were going out, they'd get up before pre-dawn, it's freezing cold, and he said even being able to see the moon through a crack in the railway carriages, because they must have freighted all the workers out to wherever they were working, in the fields somewhere. Just to be able to look at the moon, or the stars was just such, you could just give you an appreciation of something bigger than themselves and their own plight. And I'm kind of fortunate because I've got fantastic friends around me. I live in this wonderful area. You don't have to do much. Even around me now, I've got all these birds making all their little noises, lots of greenery. Yeah. So, can still eat food, or swallow food anyway. Sometimes I can swallow food. Yeah.
So it sounds like, compared to most, there's a high degree of acceptance.
Yeah, look, I kind of realised, that's virtually all of the spiritual books. That's all they talk about, isn't it? Accepting what is. And I've really learnt that. It's really banged home because it's about, that's all you can do. You can fight it, try and fight and say, stuff this, but it's not going to help. It's just going to make it harder, really. So it's just about, it is just about accepting what's going on because that's what it is, and then trying to find pleasure in the simple things. Even being, for me, some days it might be, I can have, if I go a day or a day and a half without even being able to take a sip of water, not even a teaspoon. When I get that first teaspoon of water down, and it goes down, I go, wow, this is fantastic. I got some water down, It's great. I don't have to go to the hospital and, get that bloody stuck in through a vein, So, yeah. And I think, anybody that kind of had gone on my journey, you can't you don't know these things, but I think most people, if they'd gone on the journey that I'd gone, would be in the same place, really. Because it was like a very gentle journey all along, really. It's like I was being carried, really. I was given time because I've been told, I know I'm a slow learner, sort of like, we'll delay here a little while and till you get this and then we'll move on a bit further. It's not always like that, I've had bloody days where I feel like shit, and feel depressed, and flat. But actually, surprisingly, they're getting less and less, really. Yeah. In fact, I can't remember the last time I was really flat. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
And it was a good process to Wendy, a very, very dear friend of mine. We were together, Wendy anyway, yeah. And she's very efficient and good at getting things done. And she suggested, well, look, you've got to get a will together. I'm always good at putting things off, sorry.
Do you need to...
No, it's okay. I think I can go on, yeah.
Okay, good.
Sometimes I could swallow then, so that's always a good sign.
Just watch that. The mic's just there. So when you tap your chest, you can...
It goes bang, 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 does it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'll just bump that up a bit. So tell me about Wendy. Give me the whole Wendy story.
Oh, well, Wendy said, I think I did have a will, but I realised it was way out of date. So Wendy said, look, you've got to do, you can always put it off and put off, which is what I do. I put it off and think, oh yeah, what you can't do today, you do tomorrow, you know, and then that goes on for years. So she's good at getting things done. So she just said, well, okay, we'll get a will together. And then a week or a couple of weeks after that, she said, okay, we want to get an advanced care plan. So Wendy and Linda, my two exes, are both my advanced care carers. They'll make the decision, you know, if I'm unconscious or whatever, to do all the decisions there. But that was really good too, you know, and to think about, you know, we get caught up in our own little world and all we see is ourselves. And I wasn't really, in the advanced care plan they have little questionnaires and you tick boxes, you know, would you do this, would you do that, would you do the other? And there were little details that come up when I was doing the advanced care plan. What happens after I'm dead, you know? So some people might say, oh, it's desecration to, you know, for 7 or 8 people to have a bit of the ashes and have them spread in different places, you know. But I don't give a shit, you know, what happens to my ashes. I just knew I wanted to be cremated. I didn't want any record of me being around because it seems all irrelevant anyway. We're all, anyway, but
It must have been an interesting process to go through. Like you always just knew what you wanted done with your body, you know, all along. It was a sort of an innate thing.
About least impact, really. I guess I've lived my life, tried to be relatively invisible as possible. That's been me, and have as little impact. That's kind of been my life story. I think it's about learning to have least impact, especially on other human beings, you know, so where you're not going around, you know, I can be damaged enough myself. I don't need to go around damaging other people, you know. And I notice the more I approach life become more joyful too.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to live your life, and if everyone did that, it'd be a happier world, wouldn't it? You know?
Yeah.
You know, it seems to be most of the human race goes the other way, and it's like it's all about me, and you know.
But when we're not really in our when you see another person as the enemy, when you're in your thinking, in the thinking mind, you know, you can only create that disharmony through thought, really. And so the least you think about, you know, you see little kids, you know, how lots of little clips on Facebook and that, and you see little kids, 3-year-old kids, and they just run and embrace each other because they're not caught up in thinking, oh, that person's got a dribbling nose, I'm not going to get anywhere near them, or they're the wrong colour, or wearing the wrong clothes or something. But as adults, as our mind becomes more active, we start to see faults. And well, I've got a close friend, James, and he pointed out to me several times that I'd put him in a box, you know, and I'd get really upset or angry with him if he behaved in the, you know, the dimensions of this naughty boy box that I'd put him in, you know, and I'd get frustrated, I'd get angry, and so every time I saw him, I would have a reaction to him because he was already there, and so, and he's a fantastic guy, you know. We're all the same. We all have points that some people like and some people don't like. You know, we're just who we are. Anyway, we had a big blue. I can't even remember. It's quite a while ago now. But and I thought, no, look, my time. This was still when I thought I might have extended period of time. You know, at least a few years. And I said, no, I've got to sort this out in my own head. He's right. You know, I'm putting him in a box, and every time I see him, I'm painting a negative picture of him. So I stopped it. When I noticed it happening, I kind of put it aside, and it became easier and easier. And you know, like our relationship improved from that. You know, well, he's just who he is. You know, and So, and my brother's here at the moment, Peter over from WA. And I can easily, I'm starting to see myself starting to have reactions with him, but it's just my own head, really. It's just about, so I'm trying to notice when that's happening and not just act it out, not react it out. So try and be, sometimes you can't, in fact most times you probably can't. If you try and squelch it, it kind of seeps out in other ways, the reaction. But at least notice what's happening, and yeah.
That's a really powerful practice, and I can see how beneficial that would be in relationship, especially
Definitely,
the most intimate ones.
But they're the hardest ones, because you're so caught up in it. Yeah. I noticed, with Lindo, our best relationship was after we split up, because in the relationship we hid a lot from each other because we wanted, I didn't talk things out with her because I didn't, in my mind I didn't want to offend her. Really I was just looking after myself because I didn't, wanted her to think of me as a nice person or something. But so we were both play actors in a play, and we're not being, I wasn't anyway, being totally real, and then she would respond to my unrealness. So it wasn't, we always kept up a fantastic relationship after we separated. But I think about 2 years after we'd separated, she came and visited, and we had a big blue, I can't even remember what it was about, huge blue. And then we sat down and talked it out. And our relationship just improved, because we didn't have to, it's a hard one. We didn't have to fit in with the other person to keep any sort of relationship, because we could each just walk away, There was we didn't have to sort of be a certain way. We could just be ourselves, and stuff the other person, If this is me, if they don't like it, tough. Or say, this is what I don't like, if you don't, either accept it or not.
There's no sort of attachments.
Yeah. So our relationship grew much more strongly. I think women are more aware of this because women tend to always encourage talking things out. I know Wendy taught me that one, but not that I learned to do it. And I was always reluctant. She'd say, well, what's going on for you? And I'd go, well, I don't know what's going on for me. Maybe we can talk about it tomorrow or next week, Which, that kind of worked for me if I sat on something. But it's kind of good to talk it out ASAP, really. Yeah. But for me, especially, I know sometimes I was acting out, or angry or upset, get hurt, get offended, and not really aware of what was going on. So I'd play this little circus act, like a little 2-year-old kid, running a tantrum. Yeah.
I've often noticed, in relationship, those breakthroughs are amazing when they happen. When you can actually, they'll only happen if you really sort of go there, really go into those uncomfortable places where you're both clearly stuck, and it's the last thing you want to do is kind of it's almost like, I don't know, swallowing your pride or sort of jeopardising your whole sense of identity to try to, go to those depths to work out what's really going on. But whenever you do that, the rewards are massive,
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
You've got to give up all sense of pride in yourself, because if you've got to just, I don't know, it's a hard one. And each situation's a bit different. I don't think I can talk it out. I'm not very good at describing those things sort of conversationally. Yeah, I noticed, because my time now is limited and I've got very little energy, I notice the people that are really important, there's not very many of them really. So, and there's other friends that are more distant, but they're kind of more acquaintances really. And so I notice I don't encourage a lot of. I might, and if I feel up to it, you know, like I'll go to the car boot market or something and run into lots of acquaintances, and it's a fantastic in the moment. But if you know somebody wanted to drop in here that's an acquaintance and be, you know, what's the word, deep and meaningful, it's because I haven't got a close enough relationship that it's a kind of pointless exercise. You know, it's kind of like I haven't got the time to develop that deeper relationship that I've got with a really core 2 or 3 or 4 people, you know.
And those things do develop over time, don't they? Those really deep friendships, you know, that's sort of, you know, it's not something you can really rush anyway, is it? I suppose,
No.
But then, but yeah, I imagine you must know hundreds of people though, like, you know, those acquaintances you talk about, you must go to the market or down the street and just, I bet you can't walk 5 metres without.
No, it's true, yeah, but I mean, that's this area though. I think everybody knows everybody else's face, so we all acknowledge each other. Or that's kind of another thing I've probably started to do. It's another whole nother story, but I remember when I first split up, this is a whole story, I don't know if I should even go there, but because I didn't have a whole lot of regard for remembering people's names, and after Linda and I split up, I realised I didn't have many friends. Linda had heaps. And then a friend of mine, David, I was hanging out with a friend, David, and I noticed he remembered everyone's name, you know, wherever he coffee shops or he went to timber yard, he knew everyone's name. And David he's not a great socialiser, he doesn't go to the market, or not much, you know. He's not a socialiser. Yet he made that effort. And for me, I thought, names, you know, we know the other person, names are not important. So from that point on, I started trying to remember people's names because, you know, I like to be people to know my name. You know, if they call me Fred or Bill or, you know, you're talking to them for 10 minutes and you know damn well they can't remember your name, it does feel better to remember your name. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but...
Your surname's quite unusual. Can you talk about the origins of that? I've got an unusual surname as well, but can you talk about the origins of your surname and where your family sort of originates from?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, you know, there's always been a lot of pride in my surname, but no necessity, because my surname comes from a great-grandfather, I think, or it could be a great-great-grandfather who came out from Denmark. I think was based in Germany, I think, before he came to Australia. When, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on in Europe, I think maybe it wasn't very, you know, hard to make a living. He came out and started businesses and eventually got into eucalypt distilling around the Melbourne areas, which a lot of Scandinavian people were doing, European people were doing. Australians kind of weren't onto it, you know. But I've thought about that, you know, like we follow the paternal line, you know, and yet I've got all these maternal bits, you know, like that's what the paternal line is, only one small, but we kind of, as I was growing up, you know, like I've got a collection of Ingwersen bottles over there because one of my great uncles, you know, had big distilling factories and made eucalyptus oil and boot polish and phenol and kind of everybody in the family goes, oh yeah, you know, because it was, you know, I think one of my elder brothers said he was quite a big factory. He'd seen the signage, you know, in one of the inner suburbs of Melbourne. So I think we all probably like to imagine, you know, famous ancestors or some sort of famous lineage. But I've always kind of noticed that it tends to, I thought, oh yeah, it's a bit lopsided here, focused on the paternal rather than maternal. But I kind of picked up a lot from my mother's father, so I was always a bit intrigued with that. You know, they were engineering kind of family, so, and that's very much in my family now. There's a lot of engineers in the family because that's how our brain works a bit clunky, but.
Hence the building and gravitating towards working with the hands. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not, I can pull things to bits and sometimes get them back together, yeah, like cars and stuff like clocks. You know, I was always pulling clocks to bits when I was a kid and never work out how to get them back together, like every other little boy probably.
So,
Yeah.
so I sort of got a sense that there was a Scandinavian or something background there. Just
Yeah.
what's the true pronunciation of the surname?
Well, it's been bastardised, you know, we just say Ingwersen, but it's the W over there is a V, you know, so it's, you know, if you went to Denmark where there were still Ingwersens, they would pronounce it probably Ingversen. Yeah. And it's the son of Ingvar, so Ingvar's son. Yeah. I had a niece who went over to Denmark and she said, you know, she saw there were big milk tankers somewhere going around with Ingwersen on it, you know, and that would... And see, our family line, as far as I've been told, there was two brothers, one went to the United States, one went to Australia, but all the Ingwersens, as far as I know, up until probably 20, 30 years ago, were all related. So every Ingwersen, if I come across another Ingwersen name in Australia, I know they're related. They're a second cousin or a third cousin. I might have never even met the parents or, you know, because they had big families, you know. My father had, I think he was one of 13 children in a family. Huge families. And, you know, then of course in those days there'd be one or two or three lost, you know, as infants. There was high mortality in kids, yeah. So that's the Ingwersen side of things, yeah.
And what can you tell me about your childhood, where you grew up?
Well, I was brought up, yeah, up in the Mallee of Victoria, which is kind of very dry region, and because there were 6 children in our family, so yeah, I know my father had a cerebral hemorrhage when I was quite young. I'm not sure whether it must have probably happened a year or so after my birth, but I know the house had to be quiet when I was very little. A lot of noise, and my mother was really busy trying to help my father recover. My father had to go away to Melbourne, I think, for 12 months to recover. He had to learn to, you know, read and write and speak and probably walk, you know, all those things. He had to learn all again. So my way of dealing with it was just disappear, make myself invisible, and make my own little world where even, you know, I used to climb. We had those big canvas awnings, and because it's so hot up there, and I used to get between the two bits of the awning, and there was a big pole, wooden pole at the bottom to weight it down, and I'd go in between them. You know, I must have been tiny, you know. Or just hide under, I remember hiding under bushes and making a little world for myself under bushes. And I kind of was in that space right up into my teens, really. I carried it right through even high school. I remember even out of my 20s. So I remember when Paul Simon wrote that song, I Am an Island, you know. I forget all the lyrics.
I'm a rock, I'm an island.
Yeah, and that was really me. I thought, stuff you, I don't need anybody, you know. It was kind of my way of dealing with the world. So I separated myself from everyone. I'm just going to be who I am, and I don't need anybody else. And it was a terrible way to be. Terrible. Yeah, and I don't know what brought it on, but over a long period of time and wonderful partners, I kind of learnt, well, God, everyone's in the same boat. You know, it's about getting to know the other person and appreciate them. And we're not an island. We're part of a big family, really.
Yeah, gosh. And what was your sort of earliest childhood memory?
My first, you know, sometimes I wonder if it's really real, but it was so strong. And of course I remembered it, and they say every time you remember it, it's not a true memory, it's a memory of the last memory, so things get distorted. But my first memory is of me getting in my father's car. I probably may have been in it before, much younger, but as a very small toddler, and sitting on the seat, and my memory is we were going somewhere, or my father had said to me, I don't know how old I was, maybe 2 or something, and we were going to pick up my new younger brother, which is Peter. So, and I remember sitting in the car on the, no such thing as seat belts or child restraints or anything. So I sat in the front seat next on a bench seat, would have been. My father driving and me on the bench seat, and not being able to see anywhere, because my head was below the dashboard. So you can't see anything but just the sky, you're looking at it like this. And I'm sort of noticing that, yeah. So that's that's probably my earliest memory, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Holden Kingswood or something like that.
No, it would have been an old split screen because...
Oh, a combi or something?
No, it was an old split screen Ford, because the Australian car industry hadn't been developed then, So, yeah, so it just would have been an old,
So it was a bench seat?
Well, it was a brand new car, because I think, it was the first brand new car in town or something. My dad was in business and was kind of doing okay, so he obviously had enough money to go out and buy a brand spanking new car. Yeah.
It's interesting you sort of talk about the isolation that you kind of felt, because it being the second youngest of 6 siblings.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought you'd have the option of being able to sort of
opt out,
hide away from that. You know what I mean? I would have thought you'd be sort of smack bang in the middle of all of that all the time. But
yeah. Well, my eldest, there's 10 years difference between me and my older brother. They were involved in. They were making underground, really intricate underground little hidey hole, what do you call it, underground cubby houses for themselves, and they were setting up telephone lines, between their neighbours, fairly sophisticated stuff and for kids. But in those days, and especially in Oyen, kids had free rein, they'd be sort of shoveled out the door as soon as after breakfast, and they were sort of free range and just wander back in when they, when lunch came, or mum would yell out. So you could walk as far as you wanted to. There was no concern about, it just wasn't there. You just go out and wander all around. So totally different. I remember at that very early age, probably 5 or 6, because we left that area when I was 6. But even at 6, I knew all the birds' names, and because you were sort of closer to nature and not caught up in other stuff. Yeah, and I knew, because my elder brothers were collecting eggs. There was the Bird Guild Society, and it wasn't kind of frowned on to collect eggs in those days. Well, he took one, I think, and left the rest in. So I knew what sort of nests they had. I knew what sort of eggs they had. Not as much as my older brothers, of course, but even as an infant, I probably, I had a bigger command than I would now by a mile, really. Mm.
So that's Oyen. That's a fascinating place.
Oyen.
I've been there a few times.
Yeah.
Just on my way to Adelaide to visit Steph's parents. But yeah, it's a beautiful place. There's a nice stillness out there, and I got the sense that, maybe that's, maybe that had a bit to do with your spiritual development or something, I don't know, but I always feel very still and present and when I'm in that area. I don't know why, but it's just sort of, just doesn't seem to be a lot of the noise of everyday life out there for one.
Yeah, I guess it's like very dry, desert, almost deserty country there, and
very Aussie.
Yeah, very small town.
Is Oyen one of those lovely towns that's very famous for their vanilla slices these days? I don't know if it's Oyen or it might be.
Yeah, it could have been Oyen, because there was a very good baker, Volk's pastry shop. Yeah, and I knew that, as a kid, because my father was very, very social man in the community. He kind of knew everyone was everyone's kind of best mate sort of thing. So, and they all loved him, So, well, I'm sure there's a lot of people that didn't, but, you know, from our perspective as kids, he seemed to, you know, he was there. Well, we kind of didn't have a spec, because it wasn't actually till his funeral I realised how loved he was because of the number of people turned up. But
Have you been back since?
to Oyen, yeah, but not for a long time. He had, I went back quite a few years ago because my father realised he had there was a family business which when his parents died, he inherited with his siblings, and they ran this big business. It was a kind of fruit and vegetables, and had dining rooms, and they had rooms where people would stay overnight because people had come in from the weekend from way out in the country, you know, the workers. Had lots of staff, lots of waitresses and cooks and people running everywhere. Quite a big business. They must have had lots of employees. And my dad met my mum there. She was a waitress there, and that's how they met each other. Now I've lost my train of thought where we were going. That's right. He realised there wasn't a picture theatre in town, so he built a theatre house. And he didn't run it, but some other people ran the business. He just set it up so that the town would have something. I'm sure not totally altruistic. It's probably, you know, make a few bucks if he could too, you know. But, and it'd been years and years ago, you know, when television came and shut down, it'd become a storehouse, plumbing storehouse, I think, for a local plumber. But the community got together and bought it, and they set it up as a community centre. So the family were invited up because they had an opening of this new kind of community centre, like mini performing arts centre, yeah. So we all went up for that, for their big grand opening, and there was some famous television performer there, I've forgotten his name, who was there helping with the opening. And, yeah, he was very socially. I remember once looking, when we moved to Geelong, which is where the family goes, we had this piano stool, you know, where we'd keep our music in. Piano stool and a piano, of course. And I remember opening it, looking for some music one day, and there was a stack of all these certificates about, I don't know, 4 inches thick or something, and it was always honorary member of this, honorary member of that, you know, 50 years good service here, 50, you know, it went on and on and on, and you know, he must have been in every organisation in that little town. Fire brigade, he was very big in the fire brigade, all the football clubs, probably the cricket clubs, hospital, you know, everything. And it was and, you know, they were all stashed in the piano stool.
He was a real pillar of the community.
Yeah, and not without his own shortcomings, I'm sure, you know, because I remember being. Well, I can't remember. My sister, who's quite a few years older than me, remembers being told, you know, don't mix with the kids by Dad on the other side of the tracks, you know. That's kind of the wrong side of the tracks. We were on the right side of the tracks, you know. Because there were some very poor people in those days, really poor. People lived at the tip, you know. We forget how fast we've come, really. Yeah.
And so, what about your mum? You mentioned that they met. She was a waitress.
Yeah. Bit of an age difference there, I think, but I don't know the history of that one. Yeah, but Dad had I know he'd already been to Fiji, and Tonga. He'd done a few little trips, you know, before he married. So he kind of, you know, for a little bush, you know, little village, and somebody living in a little village in the middle of, you know, nowhere, it's kind of like, would have been quite something, you know, in those days to get away and get overseas even. You know, no kid in the town would, you know, if somebody went to university, that was like really, really big. And, you know, my older brothers talk about the first person that went to university in the town. I think it was one of the doctors, or there was only one doctor there, but Dr. Nile. So he had 12 children, I think. So I think it was one of his that was the first one that went to university. So it was kind of that sort of, but which was general, I think, in Australia at that time. It was before free education, probably. We forget, you know, about how things changed again, really.
And I suppose it must have been a culture shift for your old man, like moving to Fiji. Did you go? Was that the whole family on?
No. This was before he's married. You know, before he got together with Mum. I'm not sure. Yeah. So, and as far as I know, they just had a quiet ceremony. And I remember us kids, we always used to, because we had a pair of salt and pepper shakes, they were wedding gifts, and they had the wrong date on them, you know. So my elder brother, you know, always just think we were illegitimate. He was illegitimate anyway, you know, and they had to change the dates on the, you know, not they didn't change it, but there was always that thing. Oh yeah, they had to get married, you know. I'm not sure if it's true or not. And it was never discussed with my mum or dad really, because my dad died when I was 16 or 17. Yeah, so it certainly never got. And I still had a very. When he died, I still was, you know, quite immature then. I kind of hadn't developed any sort of. I was still a father-child sort of thing going on then, and I was very immature for my age, really. Yeah.
Were you quite close to your mum?
It developed after my father died. Yeah, kind of. I did get really, really close to my mum because I did a bit of travelling, and then she developed cancer. So I used to drive her up to Peter McCallum and the clinic up there, and then she had to make big changes after my father died. She had to learn to drive a car, which my father had been trying to teach her for years. And she had to learn, you know, my father left a business which my elder brother had just moved. So my mother had to learn to be involved in the business and do all the financials, you know, which was kind of good. She had a bit of a renaissance really, because she was always Dad was the hero and she was the little lady at home. You know, she was very timid socially. So after Dad died, she kind of come out of herself really, which was really, I saw it from my perspective. I thought, oh, this is really good. So we did a few trips together actually. She took me on a South Pacific cruise. You know, she wanted to go out in a liner and she didn't want to go on her own, so she took me along. And after that, I was involved in, you know, her cancer care. I just stayed at home. But there was a part of me too that was kind of like, it was such a good deal, I just stayed there. It kind of suited me too, really. Because, you know, I didn't pay a lot of rent. In fact, I think a lot of the time I didn't pay any rent. You know, I was kind of not even aware of, or didn't want to be aware of that sort of stuff, you know. You just sort of, as a kid, you just sort of take things for granted. Up until I was probably even my 30s, I think, yeah. But anyway, we did become very close and talked a lot. So she told me lots of family history from her family side of things. You know, she showed me where her grandmother had come from and the areas of Melbourne she'd lived in the Depression, because the Depression were very hard years. You know, like again, you know, you forget how. You know, my mother lost all her teeth, and it was through malnutrition. You know, they lived on this really remote block. There was just not enough fresh fruit and vegetables. My grandmother was incredibly frugal. They did have a milking cow, and they might have even had more, but all that went to be turned into butter to be sold at the market, you know, so there was the kids only, you know, I remember Mum talking about bread and dripping. That'd be a meal, or onions, you know, have a little bit of onion. You know, it was kind of like no fresh foods, or probably no milk, maybe, or minimal. Yeah, you know, like, and they kind of, my grandfather, you know, built a house out of mud bricks, you know, because there was no money, you know, and then those there were 4 children. This is my mother's family. 2 boys and 2 girls come into that world. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you about your subsequent relationships. Like, we all know the wonderful Wendy.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys have got a famous kind of friendship. Really got a deep friendship you mentioned before. But what can you talk a little bit about Wendy and what she means to you?
Yeah. It was kind of like, I met Wendy after I moved to Lismore, so, and I went along to sticky little fly to a Byron Katie workshop. I think that's I'm pretty sure it was, that's where I first met her. But it struck me, I remember I'd been walking through the streets of Lismore, I assumed it was Lismore, one day a year or something before that, and I saw this woman opposite the street, and I thought, oh wow, somehow I just had this flash. It was kind of like one of those rare events where I thought, oh, that's kind of the woman of my life, of my dreams, we always kind of fantasising about meeting the right person. And it was around Harvey Norman or something, and it was kind of like that was the end of that. But then, blow me down, I went to this workshop, Byron Katie workshop, that Wendy and her partner at that time were running, and that's her. Whether it was or not, I don't know, because it was somebody over the road that I'd seen before. But it was kind of like, oh, that's her. And then Wendy was having a tree planting because she's doing this bush, she's got beautiful rainforest around her house there, 15 hectares or acres or whatever it is. So anyway, Wendy wasn't interested in me, but I kind of kept pursuing like a little terrier dog or something. And anyway, we finally got together, yeah. But she didn't want to really have anything to do with me, really, initially. So I had to really kind of pursue her, really. And I think she kind of might have felt sorry for me in the end and thought, oh, well, I don't know, I have to ask Wendy that one. She gave in just to sort of keep things in. But anyway, we had always had a fiery relationship, and we weren't together that long, only a couple of years, and we'd gone down. I was helping Wendy on a home down at because she used to live in Adelaide, and we were working on this beautiful old home down, and I was helping her clean it up because the tenant had moved out. And then I thought, I'll do a bit extra here, and Wendy wasn't interested in what I'd done, I was kind of expecting a pat on the head saying, oh, good boy, Bruce, you've done such a fantastic job. But she's response like, what did you do that for, you knew we needed to clean the trees down on the side, And here I got really miffed at that and really offended. And I just said to her, look, that's it, I can't do this anymore. Because that kind of same thing had come up before, really. I was wanting to be patted on the head, for doing these little things, and she wasn't going to go there, really. Because really I was just pleasing myself, really, making myself a good boy. Trying to, anyway. And she doesn't play those sort of games, really. Yeah, but it was always a fiery relationship, it was always off on, but that was the end of it. I mean, Wendy didn't want to have anything much to do with me after that. And I mean, we were both down in Adelaide together. I'd come down with her in a camper van. So, oh, what from here? And I finally said, well, look, I'll help you finish off the house at least. And that was really difficult. She didn't even want me in the house. I couldn't stay in the house anymore with her. She was like, no, you come to work, but no, you're not staying here, sort of thing. But I think we did go can't remember whether we went together or I went on my own, or then I went on my own and then we went together. But I got a bed on the floor at some of Wendy's friends, and cut a long story short, I flew back. She stayed down there a little bit longer, and that was the end of it. So, but for me, I never saw it as... Wendy's memory of it is that I said, look, I want a year's break from that, which is probably, I can't remember, but I remember I wanted a break, you know. I just need to get away and collect my thoughts, you know. But she wasn't going to have a bar of that. She said, no, it's you make the decision now. You want to head off, do your own thing, or do you want to be committed in this relationship? So I said, no, I can't do it anymore, you know. Anyway, that was the end of our relationship, really. But I kind of always made the assumption that no, we can still be friends and good buddies, you know, we can still... And that wasn't... Wendy thought, no, we're finished, you know, that's it. So I kind of had to woo her really all over again. I was like, even more so, it was, yeah. And we've just become really good buddies since then, really. So that's my story with Wendy, really. Yeah, and it's been ongoing, really. It's very similar to Linda. Our relationships have matured and deepened after we separated, really. Yeah. It's about really human friendship. Yeah. It's quite rare, I think. Yeah. Well, you know, like I've never been in a long-term committed relationship, but you know, like you said, you have ups and downs. So, and I've talked to my siblings because they've all stayed in their relationship. I think, you know, it's all about putting in the hard yards, from what I've been told, and I wasn't up for it, for good or worse.
Yeah, is that something you sort of carry as a regret, or are you just sort of, you're fairly philosophical about that, or like it's...
No, I don't. I have no regrets about it, because I wouldn't have, if I had stayed together. It was kind of, again, from an immature relationship from my side. I didn't get the perspective until Wendy said, piss off, you know. So I didn't kind of appreciate her until after she was gone. Yeah, so...
It's like all the songs say.
Yeah.
You know what you got through them. Yeah.
And same with Linda too, you know. Well, it was kind of like our relationship grew after we each went our own way, really. Yeah.
And so when we met, that was post Wendy, and we met at that Eckhart Tolle, those Eckhart Tolle nights in Naomi and Dougie's. So, I mean, by then you seem to be well and truly down your spiritual path. I just got a sense, you know, when we'd have a cuppa in the kitchen, you know, and some of the things you'd say, I'd sort of go, wow, you know. I often, I was always quite blown away by, you already seemed to embody a lot of what Eckhart was talking about, just sort of just a nice stillness and a presence, and, you know, you didn't seem to be too attached to, you know, stuff, material stuff or anything like that, you know. And what have you? Is there sort of? I suppose are there life lessons that you would want to impart on your, or leave your audience with? Are there things that you sort of, you know, everyone's journey is very different, but is there stuff that you know, I guess, what are those gems that you've sort of picked up along the way?
Well, you know, those kind of like, because I saw the whole group like that. I saw, you know, everybody was the way you were describing it, you know, like, so I certainly didn't see myself any different to anyone else, really. And I wasn't, I wasn't any different to anyone else really. It's easy to be in a kind of open-hearted space when you're with a bunch of, because I used to know that you go to the Shannon markets, everyone's happy, so it's like going to church, everyone's feeling in a good space, or you go to a Hare Krishna gathering where we're all going, and you feel good, because you're part of the gang, you're part of this some sort of group thing, especially if everyone's happy. And no, there's nothing. I think we all learn. I look at my siblings. I'm no wiser. Well, we get our lessons thrown at us from life, not because we can look and search, but that only my initial inquiry only comes through over a period of circumstance. My first experience was travelling with a partner of mine from years ago, Jenny, and we were travelling around in Nepal, and her interest in the Buddhist temples and Buddhism, and then I got together with Linda, and Linda was very interested in all the stuff, and I remember not long after we'd split up, I was in a bit of a depression, I think, and she suggested I go to a Vipassana. So, Vipassana's quite hard, you're doing 10 days, and then so I ended up staying there a month. And that kind of opened the gate. I realised, because I'd become a Vipassana head and was going to convert everyone to, or tell everyone to. But I became really interested in what enlightenment meant. The word, there was this thing about everyone's talking about such and such is enlightened. The Buddha was enlightened. People said Jesus was an enlightened person. A few of the different teachers. What's the other? Anyway, there was quite a few, and there was always this word enlightened, and I was always curious what that meant. So I kind of searched out, and whenever there was a teacher anywhere near, and of course there were heaps coming through Byron because everyone's the same boat, I had fantastic chances. And Sufism too was another really great thing that I was interested in too. Quite a few years ago. So, and they all I got a little bit from each one. But, like I've seen other people, that have had, like I've got a nephew who's quite, and I talk to my older siblings, and they have their own understanding through life experience. And certainly my nephew, he had a quite deep, through a whole heap of life experiences, very hard life experiences, he had a very deep understanding of what it meant to be a human and the reality of being a human. And my nephew Tim, and sometimes he's kind of like, he's just got this fantastic overview of life and don't get caught up in the grit, it's just so I don't think there's any specific path or anything like that. There's nothing to do if it'll happen or it'll not. It'll happen. You'll learn. We're just all learning along the way, really. Like some people are. There are. You go to some people and you see yourself. Some are very reactive, and because you're just caught up in reactiveness. And other people don't react so much, but if that person that's reactive all their life and reactive even when they're dying, who knows? Maybe that's just a learning experience, and then if there is such a thing as reincarnation, they come back. There's maybe a chance to experience the other side of the coin. Maybe try this non-reactiveness change and see how that works out.
Yeah, it's often the thing, isn't it? Like just using this as your guide and just learning from the feedback you're getting. A lot of people just seem to be in this pattern and make the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah. It's a hard one because I remember I left Linda because I suddenly become infatuated with this other woman, and it took me years to get over. It was just a total infatuation with this delusion in my head who this other person was, really. And like, yeah, so we're, you know, human beings with their emotional and their thinking, you know, emotions and thought get caught up together and can create all sorts of disastrous situations, yeah. And pain and suffering, yeah.
It's a pretty mad old ride, but I mean, it can be, you know, but it is a beautiful ride, isn't it? You know, if you, I mean, you wouldn't have it any other way, I don't imagine.
Well, I remember one of the early, you know, like, look for a diamond in everything, and there always is, you know, there's always a gem in, you know, especially a really hard thing, you know, because I was always a bit, what's the word, greedy about money, I guess, and I speculated in lots of quick easy bucks, you know, and blew bundles many times, you know, in making a quick buck. And it's kind of like, but that's where you learn, you know. That's the way I had to learn, was through dollars, the loss of dollars. Yeah, and the first big time it happened, you know, I was depressed for probably a year or two afterwards, really, to come through it. So
I guess that's how the universe serves up our most important lessons. It's the stuff we get really either attached to or care about, or, you know,
yeah.
like you know, it's sort of from the quickest way to learn, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm sort of thinking now, well, I'm dying, you know, make the most of it. You know, there is a chance for getting stuff out of this, so make the most of it while I can, really. Yeah.
Oh, mate, it's been an awesome chat. I think, I mean, just to close, is there something that you just wanted to leave everyone with? Is there anything you wanted to sort of?
Not really. It's just, which, you know, it's what I'm still learning, is to be loving, you know, love. You know, and I mean, all the spiritual texts say that thing, because, you know, and you notice where there's an absence of thought, love's there. Love gets overshadowed by thought. There's no reason why we all can't be really loving human beings, and not only loving to other human beings, but to the world around us. And it's only broken or covered by thinking, thought. So, you know, when they're cuddling a baby, and they're not thinking, unless they just pooed their pants or something, or they just vomited all over you. But, you know, you're so caught up in the moment of being with the baby, and babies just do it naturally all the time. I love, you know, if I'm in the supermarket and you're seeing a baby making eye contact, I love that, because you can have this really close relationship with this other person spontaneously without any language. No, it cuts all the crap, you know. You've got an instant bond with this other human being, and it's just pure love, really. And joy, you know, because you'll be looking at a baby and the baby's kind of a bit frowning, and quite as often as not they'll suddenly burst out with a big smile, you know. Because somebody, you know, they're not just a baby in a pram that's been pushed around, you know, and got to get him home so he can get to sleep or something. He's actually, somebody else has made contact with him or her. Yeah.
Yeah, they are beautiful moments. Like, I'm going to take more care to notice those moments, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with babies.
Yeah, look, they're special, aren't they? Well, you've had two yourself, haven't you? You know what it's like, really. But I'm sure you've had the fuller experience of being exasperation and all the other things that go with being a parent, I think. And then there'll be, you know, dealing with them as they're going through their teenage years and stuff. God, wanting to borrow the car and wanting to borrow $1,000 and la-di-da, I guess. Yeah. And then smashing up the car, or
Yeah, gosh, I know. You just got to sort of strap in and go there, don't you? You know? Like,
well, I was never brave enough.
Yeah.
I never thought I had the maturity, and I didn't. I was never brave enough. I don't think I was. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't
Oh,
matter.
mate, you'd have made a wonderful parent, I think.
Maybe in my 60s or 70s, but I was too old by then. Yeah. I did think about it because I used to think when in my and I was very fortunate because I was never a parent, but she's a very dear friend now. Jessica turned on the scene, and I was kind of a bit, not I wouldn't say infatuated, but kind of a little bit in love with Jessica. But she's bloody, much younger than me. It's just absurd, really. And I realised, she's could be my daughter, and so it was so beautiful with Jessica because it's like I had the daughter I'd never had. I don't know what Jessica would think of that, but and so we've become so close, It's like, oh wow, I did have a chance to be a parent, but the easy way without having to change nappies or put up with tantrums when they're in their teen years or all that stuff, or when they're going wild. So, yeah, I feel really fortunate. My life's been, I've had a really good innings, really. Yeah, all said and done. Yeah.
Well, I think I'll speak on behalf of everyone who's met you, mate. You've certainly enriched our lives, It's been a joy to share a bit of that journey, and
It's a two-way street.
yeah.
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 Mm.
Well, look, mate. If there's nothing else you wanted to sort of commit
Not
to
really,
camera,
yeah.
I might have to wrap it up. But
And thank you for suggesting this. I would never ever do this.
oh,
Yeah,
look,
but
I'm
so
glad
it's
to
been
do it.
an interesting experience for me because I never thought I could sit in front of a camera, but yeah. So thanks for taking the time. I know your time's really, really tight.
Oh, no, this is
And
precious time, mate. Yeah,
yeah.
it's great to share it with you.
Yeah.
I'm really glad we did it.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan.
Oh, I love you, mate.
Yeah.